July 4th, 1859, Monticello, Florida. The smoke started after church. By the time the last hymn faded, the screams had begun. 3 white men lay face first in boiling fat, arms jerking, skin peeling like bark from a burned tree. Silence followed, not guided by prayer this time, but by shock. The congregation had no words, but Eliza did. Not with her mouth, with her memory, with her hands. They called her the girl from the Penfield kitchen, but she was no girl. She was thunder with her, tongue bitten through. She was fire made flesh. She walked barefoot on heat the earth hadn't cooled yet. She had hands brown as roasted coffee, eyes dark like molasses poured slow, and a mouth that rarely opened unless it was to say yes. Ma'am? With teeth pressed so tight they almost cracked. Eliza, that was the name left on their lips. A name they never said with respect, only with annoyance, with commands, with slaps. That Sunday morning, they didn't even notice the slow look in her eyes. She stirred pork fat in a barrel while they walked past, grunting, "Smells good, girl," and it did. The lard smelled like harvest Sundays, like fried cornmeal and turkey legs, stew with bones still cracking, and peach glaze from the hands of a woman who cooked like God was tasting. But this Sunday, God wasn't invited. This wasn't a meal, it was a reckoning. And the barrels, they weren't for fried chicken, they were for penance. Let me bring you back, just a few days before. The fire touched bone. The Penfield Plantation sat on 400 acres just east of Monticello. Moss hung thick from oaks. The ground baked hard under the Florida sun. You could hear the insects louder than most voices. That was the way the Penfields liked it, quiet. Matthew Penfield owned 37 slaves. Thaddeus Crane, his brother-in-law, helped run crop schedules and punishment. And their partner in profit was Josiah Lowe, overseer, part-time preacher, full-time devil. Each man was well-fed, well-armed and God-fearing, or so it seemed. They never cussed in front of their wives, but they burned backs like parchment behind sheds. They spoke of Christian duty with mouths still wet from violence. And standing 5 feet away, silent, glove-fingered, spine straight, Eliza watched and learned. At just 23, she looked older, not from wrinkles, and she had none, but from how she moved, cautious like a deer near the scent of wolves. She'd been working in the plantation, house kitchen since age 11, taken from the field after Abigail Penfield noticed how tender. She peeled yams without cutting her fingers once. By 13, she was bathing the Penfield children before night prayers. By 15, she baked 6 pies every Sunday without help. She folded orange peel into her dough like magic, but never smiled when they praised her, because she knew it wasn't praise, just performance. Trained girl who knew how not to be whipped. She learned many things. Which forks went on which side. That the master liked his pork not too dry. That a missed spice meant a bruised ear. But more than that, Eliza learned eyes. She saw the look Joshua Lowe gave Dinah, the girl who embroidered, the dinner cloths. How his stare swept her up like meat. How Dinah shrank smaller with every visit. Eliza could tell when something was about to break, and she saw it was already cracking. Sunday was always the same, until it wasn't. After early morning service at St. Jonathan's, the white folk feasted. Hams baked with brown sugar, peas with lard, molasses bread crusted just right, the yard filled with song, laughter, cigar smoke, liberty. They cheered on America, twirled flags made by women who couldn't vote, told stories about the War of 1812, while field hands folded their heads just low enough to be invisible. And behind the table, hot face, burning skin, Eliza fed them. This time, she didn't speak, didn't smirk, didn't blink too often, just moved from pot to pot, eating sliced tomatoes like flesh, shredded pork like memory. Her palms stung from gripping the butcher's cleaver, not for cutting meat, but for imagining how quiet the men would be once it dropped. Auntie Ruth tried to speak to her that Friday. Chilly. Your eyes ain't settin' right. They gone somewhere. But Eliza just nodded, smiled a ghost smile. Her hands were busy scrubbing kettles with Lie making sure the barrels were clean, making sure the hooks were sharpened, making sure the smokehouse door didn't creak when opened. What she was cooking wasn't food. It was a funeral. That night, thunderclouds rolled southeast, but no rain came, just heat. So thick, people joked it was devil's breath. Eliza didn't laugh. She slipped outside, eyes fixed on the two massive lard barrels by the smokehouse. She dragged them both herself, to be ready for Sunday. Inside, she hid a bucket of kerosene, a pile of hooks, 2 wooden rods she'd used to lift anything, heavy, and a plan. Matthew Penfield, Thaddeus Crane, Josiah. Lo, they all had a time slot in her mind. While 3 liked to sneak a taste before anyone was served. She knew their steps, their habits, their blindness, and she knew. No one watches a black girl near her stove. Are you still here? Are the hairs standing on the back of your neck? Because this is just the first breath of the storm. Segment 2 will take us into the bloodlines behind Eliza's silence, the hands that scarred her, the names she could never bury. Where the rage was born, want it right away? Comment, continue segment 2 below. And don't forget to subscribe, because flames remember every name we forget. If you're watching this, ask yourself, do you carry pain that didn't begin with you, but lives inside you like it did? Do you remember someone gone so fully, it's as if they've never left your bones? Then your memory is holy, and Eliza's memory may very well be yours. Before the flame, before the oil, before Josiah Lowe's screams stretched into the sky, there was Cora. There was rhythm and breath, blood and hymn. There was a mother rocking a baby without a cradle, fingers calloused, but voice smooth like butter melting on cornmeal. Cora, Eliza's mama. The only warmth she ever trusted. They were inseparable, until they weren't. Eliza was born in silence. Not from pain, but from instruction. Don't you cry. Baby, Cora whispered after birthing her in the broom closet of the Penfield house. Cry and they gon' take you from me quick. So Eliza didn't cry. Slaves weren't allowed to be born. Not really. They just arrived as property increasing inventory. Owners pretended it was blessing. It was business. Cora tried to make it sacred. Anyway, she wrapped baby Eliza in a flour sack stitched with her own hair. She sang to her in low tones the wind couldn't carry. She split cornbread in her own mouth for the child to eat, and they lived for a while. Eliza's first memory was soft, Mama washing her with perfumed leaves after she'd soiled herself. Her second memory was sharp, watching Matthew Penfield's boots walk over baby kittens for amusement. Her third was when the boots found Cora. Cora loved to sing, not hymns from the Master's church, but deep, sorrowful cries from her own ancestors, old spirituals with no author. Songs passed from chained mouth to chained mouth, but things shifted on one summer Sunday. Cora's song was too loud, too long, too real. Mistress Abigail called it distracting, said the children couldn't finish. Breakfast without weeping. Wrong mouth making noise, she said. Josiah. Lowe handled the punishment. Eliza was 8 years old. She must never forget. She would never forget. Josiah took Cora outside, laid her across a whipping post slick with other people's screams, used a leather strap dipped in pig's blood, the devil's belt, some called it. Mistress helped hold the rope. Matthew and Thaddeus watched with their arms crossed like it was theater. Eliza was made to watch. Cora didn't scream. She sang. With each lash, she sang higher, each note more broken than the last. And then, quiet. Some things break the heart all at once. Some things break it grain by grain. This broke Eliza like a flood. They left Cora there, her back open like a second mouth, her eyes empty, her song gone. Eliza touched what was left. The skin was raised, wet, and pulsating, but her mother's mouth was still. Flies were already landing. She buried her with a twig as a headstone, whispered the same phrase over and over. I remember. I remember. I remember. After Cora's death, Eliza changed. The light in her eyes dimmed. Not gone, just behind something. like a candle left in a box. Still burning, unseen, she obeyed. She stitched. She cleaned. She cooked. That's when they moved her to the house, full-time. No one asked. The girl, if she had nightmares, if she woke up sweating, if... She flashed back whenever someone sang too loud, because no one saw. Eliza, when they saw girl, a shadow with hands. Then came Dinah. Girl barely older than her. Slender fingers. Golden brown skin like roasted barley. Eyes too soft for a world so sharp. Dinah embroidered lace, not with thread, with whispers. She could make a napkin look like church robes. And she smiled too. Broader than Eliza ever dared. But Eliza knew that smile. The kind that smiles for them. Not you. Dinah was chosen by Josiah. He'd appear under the pretense of checking the silver polish, but his hand would linger too long. He'd lose his ring and make her bend. It happened in corners, closets, sometimes in front of mirrors. Eliza didn't speak, but she saw every movement. One night, Dinah came to Eliza trembling. He said, "If I say anything, he'll do what he did to your mama." Eliza didn't answer with words. She just wrapped Dinah in the cloth Cora once made, held her, both of them quiet. And then, Dinah vanished. They said she ran away, westward. Into the woods. Some can't take the field. After all, whispered Mistress, but Eliza knew better. She saw Josiah the next day, whistling, covered in sweat, not from work, and she saw something else by the pig pen. Red streaks ran down a rock, fresh dirt packed by a shoe no slave would dare wear. Eliza stood there for hours, staring. Someone tried to move her. She wouldn't budge. That night, she folded her apron in a perfect square, whispered both names like a song. Cora, Dinah, Cora, Dinah. She lit a candle near the lard barrel, stared into the flickering light, and saw what had to be done. They say blood waters memory. And Eliza, she watered hers daily. Every time she stirred stew, every time she dipped the ladle, every time another white man complimented her pie. She smiled. The smile wasn't joy, it was a mask, a warning, promise. Because every death deserves remembering, and some memories deserve fire. Just before dawn in late June, she slipped outside and tested the first lard barrel. She tightened the seal, checked the iron pot above the second. Flame she practiced laying down the stirring rods, not or with a cook's grace, with a warrior's. Willett, Matthew, Thaddeus, Josiah, those names. And the other ones, Cora, Dinah. 6 syllables total, 3 victims, 2 angels, 1 Eliza, and a fire coming that wouldn't stop at skin. Are you still watching? Is justice soft or is it heavy? Does it whisper like a sermon or ring like iron dropped on a wooden floor? If you've ever held your breath for too long, not from fear, but fire, you already know the answer. This is Eliza's breathless moment, when the line between victim and weapon burns away completely. They thought she was quiet because she was dumb. They thought she stirred pots because she loved to serve. They thought she smiled to please them. They never once thought a pot could be a grave. They never thought, too, barrels of lard could become a sermon unlike any they'd ever heard in church. They never thought that girl named Eliza was taking notes, not for recipes, but for ruin. But Eliza thought, and Eliza planned. It was June 25th, 1859, when the plan came into form, all at once, like a vision made of honey, ashes and blood, the kind of revelation that doesn't come from God, but from pain so deep, it echoes louder than heaven. There was a Sunday picnic a week before the 4th, a test run. She called it in her thoughts. The planters laughed. Beneath hanging lamps, Josiah Lowe spilled rum on his shirt. Thaddeus Crane walked too close behind a girl who couldn't yet spell her own. Dame Matthew Penfield offered Eliza a bite from his turkey. Leg, she said nothing, just held his gaze for 1, 2, 3 seconds too long. He looked annoyed. Something in your eye, girl. She blinked. No, sir, she said, but inside? Fire, again and again fire. That evening, inside the smokehouse, she drew in the dirt using chicken bones. Shape, 2 barrels, 3 dots, 1 for Thaddeus, One for Josiah, one for Matthew. Each marked out with names they had long forgotten had any power. Every detail had to be precise. Eliza didn't believe in luck. Luck hadn't saved her mama. Luck hadn't stitched Dinah into the night sky with stars. So, she made sure it wasn't fate that would boil these men. It would be preparation. Step 1. Organize the barrels. She arranged the 2 largest barrels, normally used in hog processing, near the side of the smokehouse. Told Mistress Penfield they were to save time on chicken frying for the holiday rush. They nodded approval. They never questioned Eliza about cooking, just expected her near the heat, smelling of garlic and sweat by dawn. Step 2. The lard. She emptied the regular stores slowly, used extra in meals, accidentally spilled portions, then asked if she could replenish it early for the 4th of July preparations. They allowed it. She filled both drums, not with plans for cuisine, but with intent. Thick, greasy, flammable intent. She stirred each vat twice a day for a week, kept the heat under them just low enough to warm, never boil. Need it ready in time, she said. No one questioned. Her silence worked better than any disguise. One night, maybe 3 days before the 4th, she stood alone in the kitchen, past midnight, everyone else asleep. She stirred the oil under low flame. Each lap of the ladle hummed deep. The fire responded in crackles, like it could hear her thoughts. She thought of her mother, Cora, skin laid open like sliced sugarcane. She thought of Dinah, snatched in the jungle of men's desire, and dumped behind the pigsty like marrowless bone. She whispered both names as she stirred, over and over. Cora, Dinah, Cora, Dinah. The air smelled of salt and smoke, and the distant trace of figs left out to rot. She tasted blood on her tongue, not from injury, but from memory. Some wounds chew from the inside. That night, she returned to her quarters without wiping her hands, let the grease stain her pillow. Like a soldier, she slept armed. Each visit from the men was studied. Matthew Penfield liked to arrive early. He called it quality. Testing. He'd grip Eliza's shoulder with heavy hands and peer into the pots like he had a right to everything. Thaddeus Crane had more swagger, slow steps, gold chains swinging across his belly. He whistled when he was close, like a rattlesnake announcing its own danger. He liked to lean in near Eliza's ear and say, "You missed a spot," then smirk at the invisible stain. Josiah Lowe came last. Didn't say much, just touched the spoons, sniffed the broth, looked her over as he muttered things like, "Yes, yes." That was his rhythm, always in that order. Eliza took note, down to the second, to the breath. Things like placement mattered, where each man stood, where the hook was, how high she needed the flame. She even calculated screaming time, how soon before the others could respond. She even gathered kerosene, bought under a fake errand for lamp refilling. No one watched her too closely, because the world never looks too long at black women with cast iron pots. Even when the contents boil hot enough to peel skin from soul. She wanted music that morning. Freedom Day, they called it, July 4th, 1859. The sky was sugar blue. The devil's heat curled up through the soil, thick with the scent of jasmine and boiled salt pork. As reapers shaved cane, as children braided pine straw, as guests filed into St. Jonathan's Chapel, Eliza stood over the barrels waiting. The drums were half full. The wood underneath dry as last autumn's. Regrets. A single spark would erupt them, but it wasn't time. Not yet. She wasn't just cooking. She was timing. She was tuning the air. The preacher roared behind the chapel walls. "Let liberty ring from heaven to the earth." Eliza smirked. She remembered how Dinah once sang those very same words while folding linens, just weeks before being swallowed whole. The flame under the drums rose. Eliza adjusted the fire just a little more. Not too fast. Not too soon. Precision over passion. Rage can't cook right if it's rushed. The plan was simple. Eliza would call over Matthew first, let him lean in to admire the aroma. Then she'd shove him in, one clean push. The other two would fall in line, just how they always Moved one for Cora, one for Dinah, one for herself. Not just blood for blood. Memory for silence. Justice in fat and flame. The sun reached noon. Church bells rang. The day of freedom for America. The day of fire for Eliza. She removed the lid from each barrel. Steam rose. By God. Even the air changed. Smelled like gunpowder mixed with syrup and old scripture. Eliza, silent, still smooth, picked up the long stirring rod. Renee, her fingers down the grain of it like a rosary, her apron tight, her breath slow, her heartbeat steady. She whispered, "Mama said don't cry, so I'm not. I'll just cook." Slow. This was not madness. This was not hysteria. This was not evil. This was premeditated. Resurrection. Resurrecting voices ignored. Resurrecting. Screams buried. Resurrecting Cora. Resurrecting Dinah. They thought Eliza boiled food. They were wrong. Eliza boiled history that day. It was Sunday, July 4th, Freedom Day for some. Praise rose from the church in thick, oak-backed chorus. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. But glory was not coming. Judgment came first. Behind the Penfield kitchen, past the barrels of ripening peaches and the wagons lined with feed sacks, smoke rose. 2 drums, 2 flames, one miracle unfolding. Not the kind that parted seas, the kind that opened skin. Eliza waited. She stood in a halo of steam, apron starched to her stomach, arms cut strong from years of lifting iron pots heavier than sin. Her eyes burned, not from ash, not from heat, but from purpose. She moved, with the calm of someone finishing something holy. The barrels were boiling, bubbling, raging, not with water, but with lard, thick pig, fat, white, slippery, treacherous, entirely unforgiving. It hissed like it knew what its job was that day. Matthew. Penfield came first, fat palms swinging at his sides, flushed with pork and power, his shirt already stained with mustard. "You done back here, girl?" he grunted. Eliza nodded. "Got any turkey legs in these? That smells righteous." He leaned over the first barrel, peering into the blur of heat and swirling pale fire. "I might just marry you if the food tastes as good as it smells." "Girl," he joked. Eliza didn't laugh. She remembered Mommy's open back. She remembered how he laughed when Josiah dragged Dinah away. She remembered biting her tongue until blood ran down her throat. And now, she lifted the iron stirring rod with both hands. One clean move, not from rage, not from impulse, from calculation. She shoved Matthew Penfield forward. His scream cut through the summer air like lightning through linen. His face sizzled before he fell. The smell changed immediately. Meat, hair, cloth, burning onto skin. He thrashed, arms jerking, mouth wide open but silent now. The fat splashed hissed louder, thick bubbles cracking open with pieces of his name inside. Thaddeus Crane saw it happen. He came running. "What in the devil?" He stopped when he saw the barrel, and Eliza still holding the iron rod, steam rising around her like a shroud, eyes glowing like coal under pressure. What you doing, you crazy bitch?" He lunged, but Eliza didn't move away. She moved into him, used the rod again, once to the shoulder, twice to the stomach, a third time as his knees gave, and then she dragged him screaming. He tried to twist, tried to call someone, "Help me! God Almighty, help me!" God was silent. Only the fire answered. She tipped Thaddeus forward over the lip of the second barrel. His arm sank first, then to shoulder and then face. His screams became gurgles, then bubbles, lots of them. The lard popping in. Applause. One for Cora, one for Dinah. And then came Josiah low. It could have ended there. 2 was enough for any reckoning. But Eliza didn't obey numbers anymore. Fate had set it to 3. He saw her. He knew. He didn't scream right away. He didn't shout. He just looked horrified, though exposed, like someone who's worn a mask too long only to feel it sliding off in front of everyone. "Girl," he whined. You You don't gotta do none of this. Eliza tilted her head. You come over here, she said. First time she spoke all morning. Her voice was honey and iron mixed into something ancient. He kept stepping back. Let's talk now. Be smart. Smart was not singing, she said, still walking forward. Smart was smiling after you tore Dinah's inside to pieces. Josiah's lips trembled. She was property. You know how it go. Eliza dropped the rod and pulled a long hook from the barrel's side. It still dripped with fire. Sweat sizzling. Josiah turned and tried to bolt, but Eliza already knew his gait, his steps. She tripped him before he could yell. Again, quick twist behind the ankle. He fell into the dirt. Face first, tried to crawl, got no more than 2 feet, and she straddled him, the hook to his spine. Thunk one, groan, thunk two. She didn't stop till the third, just like the number of times he told Dinah it was her fault. She stood. He was gasping. I got a wife, he hissed. Eliza nodded. You buried mine, she whispered. Now I bury yours. And she yanked him up. No strength left. He fumbled like wet rope, and she tossed his body slowly into the same barrel Thaddeus was boiling in. The sound he made wasn't quite human, more like fat squealing, bones knocking against iron in rhythm. The smell, it changed again. Now it was death in complete surrender. Silence spread. No one screamed now, not the other slaves, not the white women inside the parlor, not the children holding pie crusts. Everyone turned to look, but no one stepped forward. Smoke curled around Eliza as gently as a mother's arms. Steam wove through her curls like wrapping cloth for the dead, and she stood, empty and full at the same time, her soul both burned and rebirthed. Hours passed, flames turned to embers. What remained inside those barrels never looked human again. Auntie Ruth came to her softly, quiet as moss. Child, what you gon' do now? Eliza didn't respond, but her hands lowered the ladle, gently resting it against the side of the vat. They always said my hands were good for cooking, she said. They wasn't. Lying. Someone came with chains. She didn't flinch. Someone yelled her name. She didn't turn even when they beat her. Broke teeth from her mouth. She didn't cry. She just whispered. One for Cora, one for Dinah, one for me. Her final words before they let that rope drop. Heat don't scare me. They hung her at dusk, said it took longer than usual. Neck didn't snap. Right. Some said she looked them in the eyes. Others say she smiled as the sunset turned blood orange behind her. No last prayers, no preacher willing, only flies and firelight. Behind the smokehouse, grass never grew again. The ground stayed dark. Worms wouldn't live there. Animals wouldn't feed near it. They tried to clean the barrels. They melted both down. But still, when the wind is right, you can hear 3 names boiling just beneath the dirt. Matthew, Thaddeus, Josiah, and her name? Eliza still whispered, still burning, still cooking up justice wherever feet are shackled by memory. We're not done. The story isn't complete until we witness what came next. Part of the aftermath, the silence, and the ghosts Eliza left behind. What happens after the fire dies? When the wood is ash and the blood no longer shines in the sun? Did you think pain walks away when the killers are quiet? Think again. In Monticello, Florida, the smoke stayed. It lived in cabins. It lived under fingernails. It lived behind the eyes of every single person who saw what Eliza did and never forgot it. Word didn't travel by paper. It traveled by whisper, by shadow, by prayer. Eliza was shackled that same evening. They wrapped her wrists in iron, but not her. To mouth them out there was no need. She didn't scream, she didn't beg. She watched them fumbling over chains like boys who'd never won a war. She stood barefoot in soil still slick with lard and human remains. Deputy from Tallahassee arrived in the night, while women still clutched handkerchiefs to their mouths, and white men gathered to decide what punishment would send a message. The message Eliza sent had already arrived. The first thing they said, don't let the others see her. They meant the other slaves. They dragged her behind the garden shed, her in hay to dull the spectacle, but still every eye watched, from trees, from behind broken barrels, from inside rocking chairs that didn't rock. Eliza wasn't just a cook anymore. She was a bonfire on legs, ablaze with lips, a storm in stiff cotton. Old Reverend Wallace, the same man who had baptized Josiah Lowe in St. Jonathan's Creek, shook his head when he saw her. "You made the devil's recipe," he muttered. Eliza tilted her head, still calm. "No, sir, that recipe already belonged to y'all. I just served it hot." They beat her before the hanging. Quiet beatings, no public flogging. Just behind the smokehouse, Auntie Ruth found her, just once. Eliza was curled over, bruised and bloodied, but still breathing steady. "Chilly," Ruth whispered. "You ain't got to say nothing. But do you regret it? Even one bit?" Eliza raised her eyes, swollen nearly shut. It smelled right this time. Ruth, the oil, the smoke. For once, it smelled right. That was the last anyone ever heard from Eliza Penfield. Yes, Penfield, because in their books, slaves belonged to their masters. Slaves didn't own mothers, but they were assigned names like property, like hounds, like broken tools. But Eliza never called herself by that. The last name she ever spoke was Cora. At dawn, the noose was made from tobacco rope, thicker than usual. They feared she'd survive a weaker knot. She was led barefoot. Her scalp had dried blood in it. But somehow, her chin was still lifted. Locals came out not to cheer, but to see if she would scream. She didn't. One man tried to spit on her feet. Missed. Another held his daughter close and said, "Don't look. That's what demons look like when they die." The girl looked anyway. Years later, she'd tell her own daughter, "I once saw a woman who looked like she wasn't afraid of hell." The rope dropped. Some say her death was quick. Others say it wasn't. Some say her neck didn't break. Some say the wind changed suddenly, and the trees bent away from the gallows, not toward it. One older slave named Henry claimed, "The sun dipped down when she hung, like even the sky ain't want to see it." And still, the smoke stayed. It entered cabins, cloaked itself in the fingers of those who folded cornmeal into hush puppies. It curled around broom handles. It whispered in prayer meetings. It lived between the lines when someone choked on the name Eliza, but didn't dare say more. It was even on the breeze the following Sunday, when no one showed up to eat after church. The Penfield kitchen sat cold. No music, no meat, no God. Mrs. Abigail couldn't find anyone to clean the linens. The barrels were scrubbed with vinegar and lime water. Still, no one would cook near them. "Gone cursed someone," muttered. They tried to melt them down. One burst into flame without warning. No one was injured, but the scorch mark on the earth would last for decades. Other plantations began to watch their house slaves more closely. Even girls with limp wrists and slouched shoulders were watched. "You never know," one overseer said, "who's got hot lard dreams in their head. But rules can't stop memory, and justice, even when scorched, tends to bloom back wild." Somewhere near Tallahassee, 2 years later in 1861, another kitchen girl laced the children's lemonade with oleander. She claimed to have heard the name Eliza in the wind. In Georgia, a healed-over scar was found shaped like an E on a woman's hip, though branded. She said it called her chosen by fire. In Mississippi, women marked their daughters' baptism cloths with oil stains on accident, but everyone knew it wasn't no accident. It was invocation. Eliza's story didn't survive in books. You can't print fire like that. But it echoed in legend passed from breath to breath. She cooked 'em live and walked away barefoot. Didn't scream when the rope came. Said her mama taught her silence, and the fire taught her the rest. Slaves told it quiet. Mothers told it nervous. Children dreamed it louder than thunder. And the ones who never knew Eliza, they knew what she'd done, and more importantly, why too she hadn't just boiled 3 white men. She had boiled an illusion. The lie that submission is destiny. The myth that silence is safety. The cruel joke that God sees everything, but never sends anyone to stop it. Eliza corrected heaven. She's buried with no marker, no grave, no name wood-carved with the year and scripture. But in Monticello, your feet will tingle if you walk past the old garden where the barrels used to be. And if your skin's the right color, maybe if your eyes carry enough memory, you'll feel it, the heat, just below the footpath, where Eliza cooked justice and left the kitchen door open behind her, still with us. What you've heard isn't the end. There's still one more log to throw on this fire. Are you still breathing? Then know this. Eliza's story didn't die at the noose, didn't end in the ash, didn't stay sealed in barrels where men lost their skin, because some stories don't fade, they multiply and carry heat wherever they go. After the hangings, after. The white men whispered madness and witchcraft to explain away what had happened in Monticello. Eliza's memory was supposed to rot under southern heat, but it didn't. It traveled by wound by women who cooked with their eyes open. Some said she had cursed the Penfield land forever. Some said she was not dead at all, that the rope snapped and she walked through the trees. But those were just the lies they had to believe. Because the truth hurt worse. A black woman had taken revenge. Meticulous, precise, unforgiving. Worse, she'd done it without a scream, without tears. They could hang her body, but not her resolve. In quarters hundreds of miles away, people began to say, "Did y'all hear about the cook who turned pots into coffins?" It wasn't firewood she used. It was memory. They never saw it coming, and that's why it mattered. In Louisiana, a woman whipped for breaking dishes whispered something before passing out. "I ain't afraid of boiling no more." In Virginia, deep in tobacco country, a girl named Cressida smeared grease on her neck like perfume and refused to flinch when her master raised a hot iron. "She's got the Eliza fire," someone muttered. It became code. When someone traded whispers too loud after sundown, you might hear, "Careful now." You cookin' like Eliza. If someone stirred slow, stared long and didn't pray, people nodded, because they knew that woman had learned from the flame. Eliza never burned alone. Every mother who'd buried a child with salt water instead of a coffin. Every sister who watched a whip carve scripture into flesh on every broken back forced to bow in a whitewashed chapel, while the killers prayed louder than the victims screamed. They stood with her, whether they knew her name or not, whether they ever saw Florida or not, whether they ever picked up a pot or not. They knew that silence could be sharpened, and survival could be vengeance served slow. The churches never repeated her story. The judges struck it from the records. The plantation ledgers didn't note the fire, only unrest, a tidy word for justice. Historians called it a disruption. Preachers called it sinful. Wives called it monstrous. But none of them ever worked a kitchen with their mother's ghost in their throat. None of them walked barefoot in soil packed with forgotten names. None of them cooked while remembering every scream. Slaves passed the name in corners. At our tea, night. While wrapping the babies, they weren't allowed to. "Keep Eliza," they would whisper, but not with fear, with hope. The name meant heat. The name meant worth fighting for. The name meant they may own your body, but they can't touch what you burn with. Once, years later, long after Eliza's death, a freedwoman named Charity Lewis sat writing out recipes she remembered from her grandmother's kitchen. She remembered her granny never let her stir the stew pot first. When asked why, the grandmother said, "Not till you know what went in it." Charity asked what did go in it. The older woman paused. "Justice," she said, Eliza style. When abolitionists spoke of uprisings, they told stories about rebellions led by men, torches in cane fields, knives hidden under bedstraw. But there were other stories, harder to write down, like the ones where rebellion was cooked, where it smelled like garlic and iron, where it walked on two calloused feet with no nameplate to wear. Eliza wasn't a soldier, she was a servant, and still she started a war. The fire didn't fade in Monticello. Not really. The barrel staves decayed, The rope turned to dust, the key oil dipped where the gallows had stood. But the heat, that stayed in the hands of women scolded at birth for being property. They had no need to carve monuments. They remembered Eliza every time they stirred a pot. Slow, steady, dead quiet. In 1865, when the Civil War ended, and the word freedom was finally allowed to mean something in the South, one old man named Henry Moses stood outside a courthouse while everyone read the emancipation news. He didn't smile. He just said quietly, "So I seen freedom once before, boiling in a barrel. It was cooking that day. So if you're watching this now, if you're in your kitchen while listening, if your walls are quiet but your soul won't sit still, if your ancestors stir inside you, oh, you know what this was. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't insanity. It wasn't even a warning. It was a recipe, passed down not in writing, but in wound, in whispers, in fire. Because even today, somewhere in someone's memory, Eliza is still cooking. And if this story scars you a little, it's good. Let it, because it means you have skin that still listens and blood that still remembers. Eliza was born a slave. She died a flame. And in between, she made the world taste what it did to her. If this story gripped your soul, hold it tight, let that heat stay, let that justice stir. Because there are still names being buried in silence, still oil on stovetops that carry generations of screams. And if this story burns in you, it's because some fires aren't made to go out. Subscribe. For more stories they tried to silence, share this one, and for Cora, for Dinah, for Eliza, and for anyone who ever burned quietly so others could rise singing.